Lucy Polgar from LastBSTN, sponsored by Fight Division. I'm here on the Double Up podcast with Dr. Sean Aspinall. So you put a post on recently saying if anyone asks you to call them doctor, that they're an idiot. But it is actually really cool. So let's go start from the doctor status.
Sam,
talk to us a little bit about like your qualifications and like how you've got to that doctor status now.
So I did my master's in sports nutrition at John Moores. Now, John Moores, if anybody knows, especially for combat sports, is like the epicenter of combat sports research. Like, if anything good is coming out of research for combat sports, it's from John Moores. But that was the first year they'd run a sports nutrition module. But the standard of nutrition there is like, you're talking, the lecturers are like from Team Sky, England Rugby.
Oh, wow, cool.
They were working in the UFC and stuff way before it was like a thing.
Yeah.
So the standard of what I was set up for there was insane. Like, it's one of those scenarios where you can think you're as smart as you want, but you walk into a room with those people and you feel so stupid. So I did my master's there, except at the time I was fighting Thai and I was a terrible student. Like, I'm pretty sure I finished bottom of the class doing the masters. Passed, but it was one of them where, you know, the kid in school who says, "Oh, I didn't revise, but I still passed the test." It was one of them. I could get away with it, like, but it was not a good standard. Like, I just met Carl 2 weeks ago at the UFC, and I was like, "You probably don't even remember me," and he was like, "No, I do." I was like, "Oh shit, that's not a good
You're
thing."
that guy who never revised and still passed.
Yeah, please don't remember me for that. Like, if you had a list of people not to make it in nutrition, like, you were striking me off the list straight away.
Oh, that's fascinating. I was considering where you are now.
You know what it was? I was just so obsessed with like training and Thai and everything. It was like morning sessions, evening sessions, and I just didn't want to go to uni.
Yeah.
And I'd fought from when I was little, and then got back into it when I was older. So I was like trying to play catch up. So I was just skipping lectures and stuff. But that was the whole reason I got into nutrition as well. So the whole reason I got into nutrition was from weight cutting. So my experiences of doing weight cuts myself was pretty mental. Like, you're 18, you're 19, you've got no idea. Like, back then, God, when was it? Like 2012, 2013?
Just no information.
There's just nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's still relatively limited now.
Yeah.
But there's nothing back then. And you're going off what your coaches have done and
Just
what their coaches
yourself,
have done. Yeah. Like, we were doing like mad stuff like 10 litres of water a day for 2 weeks.
Oh, we were just talking about this with like Peter Miller, just saying like how old school ways of doing things were just wild,
But you know what it was? It was like, when I was doing it at the time, I was like, my back's really hurting, my kidneys are really sore, but I was like, oh, this must just be like what it feels like.
This must be normal.
It was like, it'll work, but like for 2 weeks as well. So you've got to go to your job, you've got to go to uni,
like
you've got to train.
Life,
and like, even if you've drank 4 or 5 litres, what you need to pee all the time. And I was working at Tesco at the time, doing like stock controls, like scanning food. And I used to have to leave the shop floor like every 5 minutes. And my boss was like, "Where are you going?" I was like, I'm gonna pee.
Yeah.
Like, on the floor, like, I've got to go. But doing that, still made weight and everything, it was totally fine. But it was one of them where it was like, there's got to be a better way of doing this.
Yeah, of course.
So I went into nutrition from there. And then really wanted to do a PhD. So like I said, like, the standard of stuff at John Moore is like excellence and nothing less. So the placements and the opportunities that you get there are like, it's like dangling a carrot in front of you. It was like, go and work with GB Taekwondo.
Yeah, like, this is what's available to you.
You can go and work with these people.
Yeah.
But because I was such a shit student, I didn't get those opportunities then. So it was going to be like, right, well, if I need to do a PhD, I'm not getting it here. So I need to go and look for it somewhere else.
You ended up in Wales.
Ended up in Wales. So it was one of them scenarios where it was like...
Like how? Yeah, talk to us about that.
It was just I'll take anything.
Oh, really? It was literally just, I want to do a PhD.
That was it, because at the time, I couldn't decide if I wanted to go into teaching or not.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to go into a PGC because it was like another full year of stuff. So I did some supply teaching literally in Wigan. Got into the schools and was like, I hate kids. Like, I hate kids. I love the naughty.
So you're a shit student, you hate kids, we're learning a lot.
So, but I like teaching people, so like, if people will listen and engage with me.
There was something there, but it just wasn't right in that moment. Yeah.
Like, I got on really well with the naughty kids. I was like, that was me. Like, you're an idiot, but like, you're all right. Like, I knew how to push the buttons of those kids.
Yeah.
But like, and the ones who would listen, I was sound with, but then there were just some, and I'm like, if you're not engaged, I'm not bothered.
Yeah, of course.
Like, and I just couldn't see myself doing 20 years worth of teaching. So I was like, teaching's not for me. I did a little bit of like strength and conditioning stuff working out at Majestic at the time, and I was like, I'm just going to find something and just go all in on it and see what happens. So I ended up going to Wales to do this PhD on a whim. So it was, I applied and I was like, it was one of them things where you just put it in and you go, oh, we'll see what happens.
We'll see, yeah.
And then they offered it me. And then they went, there was 2 PhDs at the time, and they said, we don't care which one you want to come and do. You can choose.
Oh my God.
So then it was like, right, well, I'm moving to Wales in 3 weeks. And then that was it. And then
that's wild.
I went to Wales with no intention of doing food. So I'd fell out of love with food and nutrition stuff just because opportunities are so scarce. Like, coming from that elite environment, you're trying to get into pro sport, you're trying to get into clubs and the English Institute of Sport and all these places where there's not a lot of opportunity. So it was one of them, like, outside of that at the time, before like maybe Instagram was big or you could run your own practice, like there wasn't much to do. So it was like, right, I'm not doing this. I'll go and do something else. I'll go and lecture. So the teaching thing came back in.
Yeah, of course.
And then went to Wales and people got a whiff of that I used to do food. So I started giving free advice whilst I was there. And then that just spiraled into the business thing whilst I was doing the PhD at the time.
Yeah.
And then it just all literally everything just came by accident. It was all just like impulse. Let's just go and do it and just see what comes of it.
It's so funny because like the last 3 conversations we've had has been such a similar theme throughout. Like Ellis Barbosa was talking about that, like he was just on holiday and something just came up and he was like, sorry, I'll go for that. And then that led to something else. And it kind of just has that ripple effect of like, once you just trust that the interest is here, I'll follow it.
Yeah.
It'll just open up.
Yeah.
One of the posts you put on recently, you was talking about, so when you was doing the PhD, the funding got cut and that's what actually made you take action.
Yeah.
So in a weird way, like the adversity that was thrown on you, it kind of like woke you up to like, okay, now I've got to go all in. Talk to us about that.
So if you don't know how a PhD works, normally for a university degree, you have to pay to do it, but you normally get paid from a PhD to do it. You don't get paid very well. But it's like basically enough just to live and feed yourself on.
Yeah.
And then everything else is, well, there's not really much else to do, but you get paid to do it. But the company that we were with, it was just after COVID and they cut all the staff and then went out of business. So the money that was put aside for me to do the PhD was gone. So it was a weird conversation because I'd done a year and I had to sit down with my lecturers and they were like, well, there's no funding left. So you either take a master's, which I already had at the time, which added no value.
Yeah, of course.
Or you're going to have to go and work behind the bar at Swansea City Football Club and earn some money just to keep going because you have to do this PhD for free, essentially. Yeah. And I, at the time, was sitting next to a pro bodybuilder who was also dabbling in the idea of doing some like online coaching and stuff. So me and him we did nothing with regards to uni work. Again, great student. Nothing with regards to uni work. We just used to talk about client stuff, food stuff, how we would set this up if we were going to do it. And then the funding got cut and I was like, I've been sitting on this idea for so long. Yeah. I've literally got nothing, so I've got nothing to lose.
Love that.
Worst case scenario, I've got to go and work at the bar at Swansea City. But I know, luckily at the time, I was doing like some weightlifting and some CrossFit and I was giving people free advice. So I'd already tested the waters for like a year. Yeah. Just to see if people wanted it and people were getting results and people were engaging and people were telling other people about things.
It's like you was already building your reputation before it had even begun, really.
Just as like a hobby, though. So I had no interest in doing it. And I was like, oh, maybe it'll be a thing. But it was, again, more so people just coming to me like this and asking me. And then it was like a flick of a switch and I had nothing to lose. And it was like, well, let's go all in and see what happens. And progress, honestly, to start was really slow. I think for the first like 6 months, maybe. Because I opened the business, let's say, in 2019, December of 2019. So I ran it for a little bit, and then obviously COVID happened.
Yeah, I was just going to say COVID.
Now, weirdly, I think COVID was a little bit of a blessing with it because everybody all of a sudden was in the house. Eyes were on your phones.
On feeding, like cooking
and to be honest, a lot of people, and it worked well for me, and it's probably not a good thing to say, but people were feeling really shit about themselves. People were putting on loads of weight. People weren't necessarily like in the best shape. It was catching up on people because nobody was doing anything.
Yeah, of course.
Because you could still order takeaway at the time, couldn't you? Which was bonkers.
Weird, yeah. When you look back, it's actually wild, isn't it?
Yeah, but that almost accelerated me. For the first 3 or 4 months when it was like normal, it was relatively slow and I was having people through the doors, but there was nothing to make me think I could do this full time. And then COVID happened. All of a sudden, everything was full and I was like, damn, there's something for this.
Yeah.
but then after COVID, it was a case of, I don't really want to, now this is going to sound really bad, but I didn't really want to work with the people that I was working with. My roots were in elite sport. My roots were in excellence and providing that. So to work with like general population stuff was quite difficult.
You'd had a taste of what was...
Of course, and the motivating factors of an elite person and let's just call it like a regular person are completely different.
Yeah, of course.
The motives are different, the mindset is different, application is different. And I didn't really want to be in this, I wanted to be in this. So then it was a case of, well, I've got to figure out how to now navigate from like normal life stuff to the elite more I wanted to. And then it's just come to where I am now. The doctor status does help though. It gives me a weird little bit of authority.
Yeah,
so
of course.
Whilst the degree, I didn't massively get loads out of it. And COVID definitely turned the research question into something that I didn't want it to be. It facilitated what I'm doing now, which is, I mean, again, an accident, but like a really nice accident.
It's such a fascinating story, but like, so just talk to us then, how did you get from, because obviously you said you was at John Moores and like that was like the elite level and you was working with like Team GB and stuff, but then you went away to do the PhD and was working with like regular people. How did you get back into that high status? Because now you're working with like Tom Aspinall, which we'll get onto, like UFC, One Championship, CrossFitters. How did you get back into that elite level?
For me, it was a case of never saying no to anybody. And it was a case of, right, well, if I'm here, let's say, and I take on this person, I do a really good job with this person, and then it just slowly builds over time. Because there's no way I have authority to go in at the beginning level and go, I want to work with Tom Aspinall. Because they'll be like, why, bro? What have you done? Do you know what I mean? And it's the same with anything. You can't expect the top level straight away. You've got to almost do like the graft and the back work before you get this
put the groundwork in.
Top level stuff. And a lot of it for me was, if I can work with as many people as possible, they'll probably know somebody who'll recommend me. And then you just slowly climb this ladder. So like my roots were in CrossFit and weightlifting when I came back to it. So I fell out of love with fighting. I had no interest in getting back into fighting. And then I started working with like some really good weightlifters, Team GB, Commonwealth Games athletes. And once I'd got the status of working with those, who were just people that I was training with at the time as well. Then it filtered across the fighting. Now, luckily, I trained out of Majestic before moving to Wales.
You'd already had connections with the fight game.
So I'd already been involved with the likes of Kev and Josh Hill from way back in the day. And the fighting thing, again, was just a complete accident. I was literally doing weightlifting at the time, and you still have to make weight for weightlifting, but the process of doing so is so different to combat sports. And Josh rang me up one day and was like, I'm fighting Jack Maguire, can you help me? Because I'm heavy. And I was like, yeah, man, of course. And then the fight thing just escalated from there. It was work with Josh, started working with Dan Bonner, started working with Matt Bonner. Amazing. And then all of a sudden, my client base now is mostly fighters. And again, an accident, but one that just spiraled from there.
It's weird, like, because I get what you're saying, like, it is kind of an accident, but then also kind of not when you look back on it. It's like when you're regressing, like you were doing the work for free for a long time, for 12 months, you're doing the advice, like, you're learning the stuff yourself, you're going out and sort of, like, making a reputation. So at the time, you don't really think that's, like, leading to anything.
No.
But in hindsight, when you look back, 5 years ago, the work you were doing then, do you know what I mean? It kind of nicely comes full circle.
I think because my interests in food were so... I was so interested in food and performance and stuff that I was more than happy to do it for free. And I still say to this day, I'm a terrible businessman, right? And if I could do it for free, I'd do it for free. Just because I love doing it.
That's probably why you've been so successful, though, because people feel passionate and people resonate with that and people want to work with that because it's not just a money thing for you. You genuinely love what you're doing.
Yeah, because I love nothing more than... And I love nothing more than being in the mix and getting into fight weekends. And I just love going to a fight. So
you posted something so funny the other day. There's like a video of like Conor McGregor like dancing behind his fighter, and it was like the nutritionist coming in behind his fighter, and the fighter's like really fed up and like proper gaunt and like weight cutting, and then the nutritionist is behind like da da da.
Oh, it's me, honestly.
And he's like, that's absolutely me.
My honestly favourite bit of a fight camp, like, and I love it when a fighter wins. But when they go into the ring, as long as I've done my job and they're as fueled and as well ready as possible, you have no influence on what happens in that ring. Like, so my job then is to go and watch and support and be a teammate, basically. my biggest buzz is when they're doing the weight cut and they step on the scale and we're on weight and we're ready to go.
I've seen you
I
a
am
few
so
weights.
excited.
Yeah, we saw you at the Hitman one, and you was in a great mood.
That's like one of my favourite things to do. And seeing them get there in a decent place and ready to go and not doing it the way I was doing it is mint. And then obviously I get to go and watch.
Yeah, of course. Watch the
punch
result.
each other in the face, which
is always fun. Yeah, we love that as well.
Yeah, it's always fun.
Talk to us then a little bit about, so obviously Tom Aspinall you're working with. Yes. Tom, obviously talk to us about the rehab and what you've been doing with him, and also the fact that he's a heavyweight. So we spoke about this a little bit off camera, the diet and the advice is so different because he's not trying to cut.
I think the thing with Tom is, and you can see just from the way he fights and the way he is, like...
He's rapid for a heavyweight.
This is what I mean. So he's kind of redefining what it means to be a heavyweight.
Yeah.
And to be an athlete as a heavyweight now isn't just be as heavy as possible and come in out of shape. And even if you look at the likes of like Derek Lewis, who's just fought in the UFC, who came back in, that was the first time Derek Lewis had abs and it looked like he'd taken it seriously.
Yeah.
And I just don't think... There's a new breed of heavyweight coming through where they're faster, sharper.
Yeah.
Even in boxing, you look at the likes of AJ and people like that. These heavyweights, I get the question a lot is, it must be easy to program for a heavyweight. But the thing is when you've got somebody who's striving for the absolute excellence of everything, if anything, it's a little bit harder. Because you've got to balance a lot of things with regards... Me and Tom always have this thing. The first thing Tom came to me and said, if you look at when he fought Jake Collie, which was his very first fight, he came to me after that and said, you need to get me in shape. I look like a fat dad.
Fat dad.
And to be fair, he did.
A dad bod.
He had a proper dad bod and he was really soft and his diet was all over the place. So we kind of redefined his like knowledge of food and understanding what it was. And if people could see the level of detail that he goes into with food quality and macronutrients and everything else, like there's not necessarily a day off.
Yeah.
Like even in some of the elite level of other things that I've seen, people will give themselves a little bit of leeway here and there. Oh, I've gone over today, I've done this, I've done that. Whereas with him, it's everything's perfect all the time and has to be.
Yeah.
So programming for it isn't difficult per se. It's his standard is here, so your standard has to be at the exact same level. And
Absolutely.
if it isn't, he's on to you as to why it's not.
Yeah. So
the pressure, if anything, is there because I still think he's probably going to be UFC heavyweight champ of the world. And I don't think it's a long time coming. But the standard of every camp is always, we need more, we need more, we want more, we want to be the fastest, we want to be the biggest. And it's hard with the heavyweight because in realistic terms from the outside, he doesn't need to cut weight.
Yeah.
But Tom, and I don't know if he'll shout me for telling this, his desire, he always comes to me and goes, I want to look like The Rock. And I'm like,
love it.
I don't think you can look like just like that, like naturally like, but he always wants to be the leanest, biggest he can be. But then balancing as a heavyweight, when to pull back on food, when to get him leaner, do we have time to get him leaner? And then pushing for fight camps as well, because he eats a lot of food and he's sparring with some big guys. So output during a camp is enormous. So kind of periodizing the program to make sure he's getting what he needs when he needs is pretty key. So I'm going seeing him tomorrow to start like the prep for what would be, I think, December.
So quite a big...
like time between fights? Yeah, so obviously...
For the prep, like if you're starting working with him, like tomorrow you're going to go and start like the initiation of that, like from December.
So this is the thing, so
big.
his fight camps are like maybe 8 weeks long.
Yeah.
But for him to be the leanest, biggest that he wants to be, we have to start way earlier.
That work starts prior to that. Yeah.
But then even just being around the UFC and seeing all the other people, like being in amongst like Leon and everybody else, you see that those guys don't take a day off.
Yeah.
It's 365 all the time. They live in the athlete lifestyle all the time. And I think me as a practitioner and me with my other athletes, then I can go, well, this guy's doing this. Why are you not doing this?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I know a lot of people, I'll probably see it as a negative to be on it all the time. But I think for those who are like striving for that greatness,
you have to be.
You have to
of
be.
Course.
Like, I think success leaves clues. And even if you look at other sports, like, I don't know, like the Tiger Woodses and the Michael Jordans and everything else, like the students of the game, everything is 100% all the time. And me just being around that environment and him expecting that of me is pressure. But also it works well for me because I can take it to my other guys and go, you need this to level up.
This is what,
Yeah, like...
This is what it takes to...
Yeah, exactly. And then it only levels up everybody else then.
Yeah,
which I think
100%.
is amazing. But programming for it is, in theory, easy. The standard of what you've got to do is just so much higher than everything else.
And what's it like? So obviously, like with injuries and stuff, like because camp-wise, obviously they can't be training and stuff, but nutritionally they can still be on it in that point. So is that where your work still comes in? Like, your work doesn't really stop if there is an injury?
So with Tom, when he blew his knee out in not the last UFC, the one before, it was, we knew the knee was going to go at some point. And weirdly, it was a blessing in disguise that it happened, because it gave him time to kind of reevaluate where his body's at, and some things that we weren't happy with, some things he wasn't happy with. And when it comes to injury, we've got to sit back and go, what's the best position to put you in now?
Yeah.
And like I just said, Tom wants to be lean, Tom wants to look in the best shape possible. And I've got to tell him when he's injured, listen, the best position for you is to actually put on a little bit of weight.
Yeah.
We need to put on a little bit of body fat. We need to make sure that you aren't losing any muscle mass, but with that does come the negative side effects of the things that you don't want. So having that conversation is a difficult one, because he doesn't want to put on body fat, he doesn't want to look out of shape, he doesn't want to go back to being the dad bod kind of thing that he said he was. And mentally from the outside, you look at him and you just see Tom Aspinall, this elite fighter, but from the mental side of it, you've got to try and convince him that this is the right thing to do.
Yeah, of course.
So I was like, right, I'm going to reach out to as many people as possible. So I went back to John Moore's and reached out to all the guys there and said, listen, I've got this plan. Can you let me know if this is correct? This is what we want to do, so that we can deliver it to Tom. So we got a few different eyes on it, and I came to Tom with like the best package and said, we need to put weight on. We're going to put body fat on, but you're going to get bigger in the meantime. Your knees are going to come back as strong as possible. We're adding in little bits of extras like collagen to kind of strengthen the tissues and everything else, but all the way we're trying to manage body image as well, which is quite important. And from the outside, you don't think that's a factor. And in research, it's not something that they tell you to look for.
Yeah, of course,
so the
but like you said, like
and
mentally,
Yeah, from the theory side of it, it all makes sense. You put on muscle mass, you come back bigger, you strip it all off, you look amazing, your knee's the best it's ever been. But actually putting that into practice is way more complicated than that. But we got the buy-in. We came into camp the heaviest he's ever been, but with the biggest muscle mass he's ever had.
Yeah.
And his knee was in the best place it's ever been. And we went into London, I would argue, in probably the best shape he's ever been in. And that was
absolutely.
Getting that buy-in.
Yeah.
And that meticulous nature of doing everything. And then the programming for it with regards like food and stuff, it is more about doing the opposite of what you think. You're stationary, you can't do anything, but you're so likely to lose muscle mass. Like if you've ever had an injury yourself, like I tore my cruciate in my knee, and my quad was non-existent. Like I couldn't even lift my leg off the floor because there was nothing.
Yeah.
And for him, he can't afford to do that. So putting you in a position where your body can retain everything, even when it's in a period of not doing anything, is important. So really high protein, excess on calories for the S&C stuff that he can do. Everything for kind of that joint stability, stabilization, and everything else alongside that is important. So it's like and obviously it's different for injury to injury. Like if you had a little bit of a sprain, it'd be very different to treat you
it's like a full blowout. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, if you're having a full blowout, it's completely different. The return to play is so long, and the factors that you've got to play in, very much like we're doing with this camp, everything starts in advance. So he's had a year out, so it's taken us a year to build him back into the person that he is now.
Yeah.
And he's got some amazing strength and conditioning coaches alongside him. He's pulled in everything that he needs to do it. So it's not just my part, it's liaising with everybody else as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And even on your part, like you said, like going back to John Moore's and getting even on your part, getting that accumulative feedback as well.
And I think as a practitioner as well, I think if you ever sit back and think you know it all, then you're already losing at the game. You always have to be developing and learning and seeing what's next. And like I said at the beginning, it's a case of you go into a room with these people and you feel stupid. So I want to feel stupid. I want to know what I don't know. Like I can't answer the questions to the things I don't know. So to go into that environment and go, this is what I've planned. Is there anything you would add? Yeah. They can come back with stuff that I would never have even thought of. Yeah. Which only benefits him.
Yeah, of course.
But you have to be kind of willing to ask for that help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's the same with fighting. It's the same with anything. Like, there's always going to be somebody better than you. Looking at fighters, you would think a lot of them are very egocentric, and you see them in the ring, they're putting on this performance and the bravado and the weigh-ins, and it's mean and it's all this. And you realise these guys are more than willing to learn off each other. It's the least egotistical sport I think I've ever been involved in. Yeah. It's such a humbling atmosphere.
I was going to say, it's very humbling to get in the ring with someone and or even just sparring and to experience that.
It so is, and even I pick up off stuff like that. You can go and learn because they're willing to learn. They're willing to go here and do this, and again, it goes back to being the best. They're going, doing stuff to better themselves. So in a scenario where I need to be better, I need to go and seek advice from somewhere else as well.
Yeah, 100%. Love it. So I'm not talking just about like rehab and injury, just like day to day for somebody who's very fit, very healthy, like going through camp as normal, or even someone who's not a fighter and just like a normal, you know, going to the gym. Talk to us about like supplements, like what are the myths, what are the ones that are actually worth using? I think there's so much contradiction at the minute. There's so much information and so much misinformation and so much contradiction that I think people are just like either buying everything and being like, I'll take 100 pills a day. I watched a podcast the other day, side note, with Stephen Bartlett.
Okay.
And there's this guy on it and he's taking 120 tablets a day. And I was like, and he didn't tell me what one of them was. So I was like, bitch. So, so what should we be taking, or what's a myth?
Tom put a picture on Instagram of him looking pretty jacked and pretty lean. And online went mental for it. So if you go to the Twitter's a cesspit anyway, but I quite like it. TRT, steroids, you can get this with a diet of sleep and steroids and all this kind of stuff. And you go, obviously, evidently a lot of people have got eyes on to assume that he is. It's very much the same with McGregor when he came back from injury and you look at him and you go, yeah, he's juicy, isn't he? But then from the outside, you have no idea. But there is a lot of pressure from me to make sure that he isn't testing positive. Once he put that photo on, we had 2 drugs test straight away, back to back, and they turn up and it's random. So for me to make sure that he's getting the correct supplements is pretty key. It's a little bit different in Muay Thai because obviously it's not regulated, but I'm still going for best practice. Yeah, so anything within Form Sport on the logo, all of my guys are getting. I generally have a few brands that I would like to go for, so I'll send them towards that. But the thing with supplements for me is less is more. Supplements for me is like the sprinkles on the icing on the cake. Like if the rest of the components of the cake isn't there, they mean absolutely nothing. Yeah. And a lot of people will reach for those 1% without doing everything
as like else. The magic pill without the hard work.
Exactly. Yeah. And then they expect miracles and you go, well, are you doing all of this other stuff? It's like people who come to me and go, oh, well, creatine never works for me. I'm like, well, do you take it every day? No. Well, let's start by doing that. Is your diet sufficient enough to have the energy to then see the benefit from it? No. Well, you need to do that first. Like, the diet always has to come first. The supplement is the 1%, but I think you have to earn the right to get those 1%. Because you have to see the difference from food first. And once you see the difference from food, great. And then you start reaching for those 1%, amazing. With regards what I would recommend, the supplement stack is actually really small. I think once we start to dilute, you're going into like the Wild West of stuff then. But I always go, there's a really nice paper from the Australian Institute of Sport from a woman called Louise Burke. And if anybody's into sports nutrition, Louise Burke is like the queen of sports nutrition. Like she knows everything and we don't question Louise. And for me, the main ones are, and this is what I'll give to pretty much everybody who's involved with sport to a competitive level, would be creatine daily. We do beta-alanine if you're involved in anything that's got like an aerobic base to it, so CrossFit or Muay Thai or MMA or something like that. Before competition, we'll do beetroot shots. And then other things just for health supporting factors, so like multivitamins, omegas. And then recently, I've kind of got into the probiotics and glutamine kind of aspect from a gut health standpoint. Gut health for me is mostly diet. If you can nail your diet, you probably don't need this thing. But for a lot of people who have stomach issues, whether it's bloating or cramping or any issues with that, probiotics can just help you, put you in a position where you're less likely to experience that. And especially with fighters who do a lot of running and things like that, we can get a lot of gut damage from running. So supplementing with glutamine after a run or consistently might just minimise that damage. And it's not going to change your life. But
no,
if
like you said, those 1% add up, like absolutely.
It is, and you know what it is? It's those 1% where you probably don't notice it, but you can do an extra 30 seconds on pads that you couldn't do before. Your brain's a little bit more switched on for 1 more minute of a round. And whilst that...
Which is all the difference in...
It is, and people don't necessarily see that straight away, but you accumulate an extra minute over 5 rounds, 4 days a week, and you go, oh my God, it's like a whole other sparring session in and of itself. And the quality you gain from that just becomes exponential then. But supplements-wise, I'd probably limit it to those. I think there's a lot of talk of things like mushrooms and all of these added extras that you can see plastered all over Instagram and stuff. Yeah. CBD is another one that I get asked about quite a lot. Like, for me, I'm going to go... I always ask people, do you think the top guys do it? I get asked about, is it called snus? You know, the tobacco stuff that the footballers put in the mouth?
Yeah,
I got asked about that once and I was like, well, do the elite people in your sport do it? No. Yeah. Well, why do you need to do it then?
Yeah, there's probably a reason.
Yeah, like, are the elite people in your sport taking all these mad mushrooms and everything? No. You probably don't need to do it then.
Yeah, absolutely. We were laughing then because we had the conversation with Peter Miller the other day about CBD, and he did the same. Like I mentioned CBD, and he just sort of like rolled his eyes and was like, "Oh," like, and just went.
It's a weird one.
Went down a rabbit hole on that
because John Moore's again. The guy at John Moore's called Graham Close. Absolutely loves the idea of CBD for the benefits that it has, but it's so unregulated, and the quality of the stuff you get with the CBD is so mixed.
Yeah.
And every single company will push CBD. Like, I've had CBD stuff off clients and stuff. I'm like, I don't want this. Like, it's probably crap. It's probably nothing.
Yeah.
Until it's regulated and there's an informed sport, something out there, and there's research to suggest it does this, this, and this.
Yeah.
I'd say stay as far away from it as possible.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've mentioned informed sport a couple of times. What is informed sport?
So informed sport basically is when a company produces a supplement,
it's like their seal of approval.
The company Informed Sport will come and take a sample of that batch. So you've created a batch on a Tuesday, they'll come and take this batch and they'll test it to make sure there's nothing adverse within there. So no adverse findings, nothing that is on the banned list. And you get a little bit of a stamp of approval to say, if your supplement is from this batch, then it is safe to use. You will not test positive from it.
Yeah.
And you get like a little bit of a certificate to say it's safe. There's a lot of supplements. Now, it costs a little bit more to do that. So you'll see a few brands who don't have that, and I would always, not necessarily that they're poor quality or they're laced with steroids or anything, but it's a game of safety here. Like,
yeah, of course, you're playing it.
You can end your fight career or your sporting career by choosing the wrong supplement.
Yeah. Not even intentionally as well, just by, because they've not got that seal of
inadvertent
approval.
doping is a massive thing.
Yeah.
Now, you'll see a lot of people inadvertently dope, and some of them I don't tend to believe that they do. But it always comes back to the athlete. They see it as it is your fault and your fault alone. And it's your responsibility then to make sure that the supplements that you take are informed sport, so there's no risk of getting any adverse findings then.
Yeah, it's always, 100%, always better to play the safe game. So we've gone through supplements now. Another thing I just wanted to touch on, a couple more points, is protein. So the 40 gram myth, because I've heard this loads.
Yes.
And you did a video on it. So basically for anyone who's not heard of this, it's like a thing like if it's not got like 30, 40 grams, it's not worth it. And if it's got anything more than that, you waste it.
Yeah.
Talk to us about like how and why that's a myth.
So there's a few things on this. So I'll try not to go too deep into it. There's a concept called muscle protein synthesis. Now, muscle protein synthesis is the body having enough amino acid to be able to build and rebuild muscle and things like that. That gets stimulated at a certain threshold. So for each individual person, it's different. So if you've got a 50 kilo woman versus a 100 kilo dude, 40 grams of protein means a lot different between those two people.
Makes sense, yeah.
So a lot of this is contextual to body weight. So when we blanket approach a protein amount, we're already stepping on the wrong foot then, because it's like, well, who is that for? That's probably too much for this person. It might not be enough for this person. So hitting this threshold of muscle protein synthesis, people assumed was like the holy grail. Once you hit that, you don't need any more, because then it gets wasted or it gets peed out or all of these things. There's a few things wrong with that. So the capacity to kind of utilize protein is very individual per person. So we're using it more so as an average, but we know that if we can push protein up above to, let's just use an example of like 40, 50, 60 grams, individuals will likely utilize way more of that than they think. And some of that, granted, will go to pee, but it also goes to other bodily functions. Like, your proteins are responsible for general life. So just because it doesn't go to muscle building doesn't mean that it's gone to waste.
It's not used for something else.
Exactly. But what we've got to ask is, once we hit the threshold of protein synthesis, we're looking at two things. We're looking at protein synthesis and we're looking at overall protein in the day. So if we just hit protein synthesis all the time, do we have enough net protein balance at the end of the day? And generally, the answer to that is probably not. Whereas if we almost, let's say we exceed that 40 grams barrier, just for argument's sake, we know that if you push towards that 60 grams, you can utilize most of that anyway. But at the end of the day, your net protein balance is better. So the likelihood of you actually gaining and retaining lean muscle is a lot higher than if you kept it on the lower end. So the myth is generally based around protein synthesis, but that's just a stimulating factor. If we're looking at, does that then translate to muscle growth, we're looking at the overall target as well. So we're looking at the overall target for the day. Can we hit that? And then can we break it down into manageable doses throughout the day which might exceed that 40 grams barrier. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. You want to hit a minimum threshold. So for each individual, that'll be around 0.4 grams per kilo. So times your body weight by 0.4, and that's like a minimum amount you're aiming for. Like I said before, there has to be a level of amino acid in the blood for it to then translate to being utilised in the muscle. So we want to make sure that's hit first.
Yeah.
If we go over that, great. Like if you go over it to a massive extent, I suppose it depends what massive is. Like I've seen heavyweight dudes hit 100 grams of protein per meal. I've seen, like, that's probably in excess for somebody who's 50 kilos. But contextually for them, that might be 45 grams a meal, which might seem high and might go way above that recommendation.
It's so true how it's like subjective to the person, isn't it?
100%. And this is the same with everything. Like inter-individuality between people is massive. So one blanket approach is probably where we're going wrong. Everything's got to be nailed down to the individual time and time again. So like 0.4 grams per kilo is a good marker.
As the minimum.
As the minimum. And that's that threshold for protein synthesis. That might be your 40 grams. But exceeding that is fine. So I don't want people to be like, that meal's got 40 grams of protein, I can't have any more because I'm wasting it. You're not wasting it. It's engaging it, the chances are net protein balance at the end of the day is probably higher. You're probably getting way more benefit from doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for clearing that up, because like there's some little points in there that obviously, like you say, it's the blanket approach that I think is confusing a lot of people, because you'll just see like a little square on Instagram with a fact of like, this is a fact, and then you think, actually, it's technically a fact, but very subjective to each person.
One of my younger athletes came to me and said, I've been told by a governing body, so this is like your Team GBs or your weightlifting Waleses or something like that. The nutritionist there had said, you can't digest more than 4 eggs. I'm like,
oh, I saw that on one of your posts.
I'm like, I don't understand the concept of that. Like, what happens to those 4 eggs if you don't digest them? Are they coming straight back out? Where are they going? What's happening? Like we can digest like massive amounts of mixed meals, but you can't digest 4 eggs. I'm like, I don't understand the concept of where that's coming from, but that was playing on the idea that you can't digest that amount of protein per one.
Clucking and fucking it.
Isn't it madness? Yeah, that's what I mean, Like, after that third one, the body goes, nah, that's too many eggs, that, bro. Like, we're not having that one, too many, man.
3 and we're out.
I'm like, you tell Arnold or some bodybuilders who are smashing down 12 egg omelettes that after 3, like, you can't do anything with that.
Yeah.
Even Garson at like Beauty in the Beast. I
love it.
But honestly, like, some of the advice you get from them governing bodies is mental. Like, I've had a lot of people come to me privately from those places.
Yeah.
And I think the issue with them is the governing bodies is they're never tested, their jobs are safe, they're not willing to learn, they do things by halves, and I'm like, there's no way that you should have to come and pay me to do the job that somebody else should be doing.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
like 3 eggs was nuts.
Yeah,
3 eggs was
I did see a little Instagram rant about that.
No more than 3 eggs ever.
The last little thing I want to touch on, which I think is applicable, again, not just in the fight game, but to everyone, just generally who's looking to like maybe get in better shape, is like your best tips on hunger. So like, say if you are you're putting yourself in a deficit, you're really working hard, and then like, you know, you finish your day at work, evening hits, and you think, Jesus Christ, I would smash that bag of that bag of Doritos or Domino's. Like, what are the best tips when those cravings and that hunger takes over?
So there's a few different things with hunger. There's a few different ways that we can look at it. We've got to look at more so the reason as to why you're hungry. For a start, hunger is not an issue. Hunger is a really natural response. A lot of people feel that hunger is a failure within the diet. If you are hungry, totally fine. Just a general sensation within the body that is completely natural to be there. Like, I say to a lot of people, even if you're at maintenance, the chances are you're going to get hungry at maintenance, but you're not worried then. So as long as we can understand that hunger is pretty normal is key, and accepting that it's going to be prevalent is pretty important. Management factors, there's a few things. Regular meal spacing is one. I see a lot of people get overly hungry because they've left hours and hours and hours between meals.
That's almost encouraged nowadays, though, isn't it? This is why it's so frightening, and I do understand and I do sympathise, sorry to interrupt, with like the normal everyday person, because you're told to like leave, 8 hours between the meal, you're told to do intermittent fasting, you're told to do, which I've seen you rant on that, which is brilliant. So the information is so contradicting, but what you're saying does make a lot more sense. Like, obviously I'm going to be starving if I'm not eating for like 17 hours.
Generally, the way I set up a diet is based on how can I make you retain and sustain as much lean muscle mass as possible. That's the first thing I'm looking at. And it just coincides with you being as less hungry as possible.
Yeah.
So when we talked about this protein before, you having regular meal spaces of 3 to 5 hours, we know retains muscle best. But for you as well, to management of hunger, it also means you're getting a meal every 3 to 5 hours. Now, that meal might be a full meal, rice, potatoes, chicken or something. It might also be a yogurt-based snack with some fruit. But at the same time point, you're still filling that gap with something.
Yeah.
So almost your desire to eat kind of reduces. I have a thing, and it's not in the research anyway, but I've coined it as like a hunger debt. So my thing is the longer you leave it between meals, the more debt you accrue with regards to this hunger. So let's say you've eaten a breakfast at 6 a.m. and then you've left it till lunchtime to eat again, and you've just slowly gotten hungrier and hungrier over time. Even if you've eaten your lunchtime, it probably only knocks a little bit off that hunger debt.
This is my problem. I feel like I'm always catching up because...
Exactly. This is the hunger debt idea.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to the evening meal, that hunger debt is still there. You've still eaten your evening meal, but you're still hungry.
Yeah.
And then you sit down in an evening and go, I need something else. You probably way over on your calories already, and all of a sudden we're going, oh my God, I'm just going to eat everything.
Yes. Oh my God, never resonated with anything more.
So one of the issues with that is the regularity between meals. I think regular, consistent feeds, probably nothing massive on the scale of over big meals, but enough that you can spread it out that, very much like with the blood sugar context, is that you're almost looking to keep it relatively level.
100%.
You're not looking for really, really periods of fullness. You're not looking for really big periods of emptiness. You're looking just for homeostasis almost, which comes with small, consistent, regular feeds every 3 to 5 hours. So I would say to people, if you can eat at like 8, 11, 1, 4, 7, 10, for example, it's a good factor. But people go, oh my God, I can eat 6 times a day. I was only doing 2 or 3 meals before.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they do this and they go, I'm not even hungry by the time I've got to the end of the day.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, once you've got that structure, so structure's a big issue for me. If you've not got the structure, you can have as big a meals as you want, but like you said, you're probably still starving come the evening.
Yeah.
And then at meals, you're looking at things like high protein really helps with satiety. I like to load people up on lots of greenery, lots of vegetables, very low calorie, really high volume. So you're looking to fill that plate as much as possible.
That does help, like a massive bowl of broccoli with chili on it doesn't really cost anything in your calories.
Like if you're going home and having like turkey dinosaurs and potato waffles for like 550 calories.
Turkey dinosaurs, do you remember them?
Do you remember the turkey twizzlers as well? They were mint until Jamie Oliver got rid of it. But if you're going home and having really poor food quality, so I had this conversation just in the gym now. I like to give people a concept of free calories on weekends. So I'll plan the day and I'll go, your evening meal is now 600 calories of whatever you want. My expectation of you is that it's of good quality so that you're still full. So one of my fighters has just come to me and said, well, what about if I have a Big Mac? Because that's 550 calories. I was like, the concept of it fitting your calories is fine.
But you'll be starving again.
How hungry are you going to be after that? Is that going to fill you up enough? Can you not have steak, potatoes, greens, mushrooms and onions, which is an enormous plate's worth of food,
but
for probably less calories than what you've just done there?
Yeah.
So if fibre intake and protein intake are important, but food quality is really important. And just making sure that food quality is consistent over time not only makes you feel better, but makes you feel fuller. And if you aren't finishing a meal because you're so full, amazing. But if you're coming to the end of the day and you're ravenous and you've just smashed down like a pizza and garlic bread and you're wondering why you're hungry, even if you've done the structure, it might just be a food quality issue.
Yeah.
But food quality over everything first. That's the first thing that we can pick up. Lastly on this as well, one of my issues with this is the concept of like flexible dieting and if it fits your macros and all that kind of stuff. Now, a lot of my guys like to do that and that's fine. But if you're doing that on the foundation of just looking at calories on their own, and this is where the argument comes of, is a calorie? Because in theory it is, but like technically it's not.
If it's not satiating you and then you're having to have 10 times more an hour later.
Of course, like the food quality of everything overrides everything else. And a lot of people are more than willing to sacrifice food quality and food portion size for that extra chocolate bar at the end of the day, for those extra biscuits at the end of the day. And I'm all for that. If you can facilitate those extra biscuits at the end of the day, crack on. Because when we talk about relationship with food and balance of lifestyle and for people who just want to get fit, realistically, your diet doesn't want to be too far removed from what you'd normally do. So that has to be there because that's normal for you.
Yeah, of course.
But that has to be built on the foundations of good food quality. I always say to people, do you need a chocolate bar at 11 o'clock in the morning? Absolutely not. Most people are way too busy in the day with work and lifestyle to even consider the food that they've put in the face. So if your food's a little bit boring but does a functional job in the day, and you can sit down of an evening and have a really nice evening meal, which is of good food quality, and sit and, I don't know, maybe you watch TV and have a chocolate bar and fit that within your calories, that's the way to do it. Focus the day on function and food quality, and if you can be a little bit more lenient at the times you know you're going to snack and you know you're kind of going to crave stuff, just move it to the evening. Just don't waste it in the day.
Yeah. That's thank you so much. That's such good advice because I think that is something, obviously, like me working in gyms, like that is the biggest sort of query that people come with is in like, I'm doing everything that, you know, such a body says that I should do. I'm doing the fasting. I've not eaten 17 hours. I'm starving. I'm miserable. And then they come home and they'll smash it till like 7 o'clock. And then they'll like nail 1,000 calories because it's just like, it's too hard to maintain, like you say. So keeping it regular, keeping the structure. A calorie is not a calorie in the sense of like, it's almost like having the foresight to know right now the calorie is the calorie, but in half an hour am I going to be hungry again?
Exactly.
It's having that foresight.
And that always spirals then, because that makes you feel worse. We get these kind of restriction and binge cycles where they go, oh, I've overeaten, I'm going to pull calories back. And it just spirals into that increasing hunger debt, and you just can't then control it. And then people wonder why, oh, I can't really diet properly, I can't. And you're trying all this mad stuff like intermittent fasting and stuff is totally fine if that's your lifestyle. Like for me, I'm not a breakfast person, so I'll happily go to lunch, which isn't ideal, but it works for me.
But if it's naturally your...
Yeah, but I'm not here intermittent fasting. I'm just doing it because I'm lazy with breakfast, right? But at the same time point, if you aren't an intermittent faster or you're setting up a new diet, and the new diet that you've got is so alien to what you're normally doing, what are the chances that you're going to stick with that? To put a habit in place normally is hard, but something that's completely alien to you is way different. It's like taking somebody who's brand new at something and throwing them in the deep end with something. Like, the actual transition of that is way harder than they think. So if you aren't an intermittent faster naturally, don't do it. If you normally have breakfast. If you normally eat at 10 p.m. at night, eat at 10 p.m. at night. Just start to look at the stuff that you're eating and just increase the food quality. And I call it food literacy. People understanding what a plate looks like, people understanding what good food is. And I say good food, not that there's good and bad food, but we're leaning more towards certain foods for certain types of diets or whatever. But having that food literacy and understanding what a day should look like is pretty important. Yeah,
100%. Thank you so much. Just before I let you go, there was one thing as well that I just want to touch on one of your posts, which is hilarious. You was like, you do some really good, like, because it gets your attention. So one of them you put like, click here to see what happens if you eat after 8 o'clock. So I was like, oh, go on then. And you was like, nothing. I was like, oh, he got me, the bastard.
Don't be thinking by a fad. If it seems too good to be true, or it's over to the one end of an extreme, the chances are somebody's trying to sell you something. And unfortunately, from my perspective, I can tell you what to do, but what I'm going to tell you to do doesn't sound incredibly sexy. It's stuff that you know you should be doing anyway. It's the normal stuff, but weirdly, the normal stuff works. Like, I'm all for, like...
It's not a fad.
It's not a fad, and it doesn't sell very well, and this is the issue, but once you nail down and dive into it, it's the stuff that works. And it's the stuff that the average person's doing. It's the stuff that the elite athlete's doing. Everybody's doing the same thing. They're just doing it to a slightly different degree. But those who are successful in what they do aren't doing some mad bullshit. They're just doing pretty normal stuff.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Listen, the way you are, like, obviously, thank you so much for sharing it with us, but even on your socials as well, like say that 8 o'clock one really got me. That was so funny. And the rant about the fasting and the way that you're articulating it is very... it's very captivating. Like, it makes you want to go on your page and be like, oh, it's quite funny this. What else is he saying? So thank you so much for sharing it with us. Because like I say, even back in the day before you had the masters, before you were working with these amazing people, you were giving out this advice for free. And it's just so, obviously people are just so lucky that we've got somebody who is kind of cutting out the bullshit and just saying to us, listen, it's not very sexy, this is the normal stuff, but this is what works. This is what the elite fighters are doing. This is what the normal everyday day-to-day person is doing. Let us know where we can find your socials then, so they can check out these rants and these videos.
You can just find me on Instagram. I think, I honestly don't even know my tag. I think my Instagram tag is Origin Project and then an underscore. Or you can find me on TikTok, which I'm not mad active on, but I'm going to do some bits. It's called Usually Red on TikTok. I'm actually... just for a last little bit of an announcement, 10 years since I had my last fight. I tore my cruise shirt, right? And I thought, fight game's not for me. But I've just had a fight confirmed.
Sick!
To come back, right? So the comeback's on. I'm actually going to do my own weight cut and everything else. So
oh my God, love
me
this.
diving into, like, obviously I'm in and amongst it all the time.
Yeah,
but
of course.
Like, actually
now you're going to practice what you preach, yeah,
like,
100%.
I took the fight and I was like, oh my God. I've got to diet, I've got to run, I've got to do a diet.
Can we have Sean the fighter on stacking his nutrition on?
Absolutely, 100%. That guy's making me fucking bath and eat vegetables and he's a dickhead. But honestly, I've been around it so often and I've seen so many guys and I've put these guys through some stuff and some of them through some hard stuff to get there. So I'm going to do it, and my plan is to document as much as I can nobody wants to see a C-class fighter, right? Like, nobody wants to watch a C-class fighter, but I'm
When
going to
they're
try
a
and show
doctor
everybody.
and like,
I'm going to try and show everybody the behind the scenes of,
Yeah.
of a C-class fighter who's eating and just doing everything from my perspective,
love
from
that.
me doing it. So if you want to see that, I'm just going to stick it mostly on TikTok.
100%.
Usually red. I've got like 11 weeks, so camp starts, I don't know, Monday, maybe.
What show is it?
Stand Up War in Wales it is.
All right.
So,
oh my gosh, amazing.
yeah, it's gonna be a laugh. Just there for the lols and some good Instagram pics.
I love it. Just there for the lols. I can't. Well, 100% we'll be on that on TikTok and on your Instagram as well. Listen, thank you. We obviously wish you the best of luck. I'm sure you've got the best nutritionist behind you now for your fight. So I'm dead excited for that, and it'll be a cool flip to see the behind the scenes bit of it as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that'll be really interesting. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Double up. The money I call up.